The power of what we do is how do we get somebody from, I don't know what I'm doing when I grow up, to this is my plan, this is what I'll be doing, this is what my family will be doing, and this is why it will work.
Welcome to a Wise Retirement Podcast. Are you curious about how to plan for your future when you have a child with disabilities? I'm Casey Smith. I'm joined today by superstar Megan Temko. Hi, Megan.
Hello.
She's the founder of Parallel. Each week, we bring you practical advice on retirement, investing, and planning for your financial future. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. Let's get started.
All right.
So Megan came in and talked to our firm recently, but Megan and I go way back. We're actually neighbors. So Megan's a great neighbor.
You're a great neighbor too.
We've had interesting neighbors, I'll say.
Yes.
But we are in the Great Neighbor Club. Of Megan and watched her career and what she does. So there's no better person to do introduction than yourself.
Thanks so much for having me.
let's talk about what are you doing with Parallel and how does that relate to disabilities?
So what we do at Parallel is we help families transition their child, and that can be an adolescent or a young child, their adult child, or their loved one to the world of adulthood. And that starts at a different place for everybody. And so we serve a wide range of clients, all the way from the United States to different countries all over the world, the Middle East, and our partner network also expands the globe.
Walk me through an example.
All right. So I would say we have what we like to refer to as like our famous client inside Parallel. And he was actually our first client. And his name is Reese. And he is pretty amazing. And Reese is known to us. We knew him since he was about 12 years old. And when it came time for him to transition into the world of adulthood, his parents had a lot of questions. But they were really engaged and really intentional. They wanted this to happen really badly. And we said, well, you're our first client. Let's do this together. Let's learn together. Mm-hmm. And it was a great first client because we found out that when we work with somebody who was intentional about the future and wanted that collaborative environment, we had like the best first case scenario. Now he is at the Georgia Tech program called Excel. He's working independently in various environments. His parents and him are on the road to, I would call like an independent adulthood, and everybody's happy. So that's like a best case scenario. And that's, the power of what we do is how do we get somebody from, I don't know what I'm doing when I grow up, to this is my plan. This is what I'll be doing. This is what my family will be doing. And this is why it will work.
So the families who don't go through this process, what's happening with them? They just have a child that just stays at home and they take care of them? Yeah.
And so there's we call it the cliff in the special needs world, and it's the abrupt end of services. And that happens at 22 forcibly. But if you graduate at 18, it can happen at 18 as well. And this is when all school-based services and a lot of pediatric therapeutic services just end, and there's nothing. And this is something that happens not only here in the United States, but other places. And then you're left with, if you didn't mitigate something that was a problem, if you didn't make a proper plan, you're just at home doing nothing. Yeah. And so that's kind of what happens in the best case scenario. But if there's other issues like behavior, if there's issues like severe learning issues, and those aren't already mitigated, then you're home alone with those issues still.
What do you, or is there autism comes to mind, but there are other disabilities that you are focused on as well?
Initially we did work in the world of autism, and this is something that I had spent my career working in, but I saw what we were doing was applicable to not just the world of autism, but anybody with a special needs. So we've grown and tremendously over the past few years. And now we work with individuals with autism, with Down syndrome, with cerebral palsy, which is nondescript learning disabilities. And we work with kind of anyone that has a non-traditional path out of secondary education. So we like to say if your child had an IEP or a 504 or some sort of special learning plan in high school or middle school, that's our client base.
So I understand what Parallel does, but why don't you share a little bit about your passion and why you do this? Because you're a very smart person. You could do anything you wanted to do. Why did you choose this?
When I was in middle school in 1995, I broke my foot and I was not allowed to go to PE. I lived in Florida. It was really hot. I had this cast on and they said, you are going to go help out in what was then called a demonstration classroom. And it was a classroom in the back of my big giant middle school with the special needs kids. And they gave me, they voluntold me that you were going to be this boy, Nick. You're going to be his one-on-one like friend. Mm-hmm. And I went kicking and screaming. I was like, absolutely not. I want to sit in the front office. I want to do anything but this. And Nick changed my life. He and I became what I would think of as friends when I look back on it. He was really funny. He was diagnosed with autism. He was verbal. He had a savant skill in math. And so he actually would help me do my math homework while I was back there. Fast forward, he really inspired my whole career. And when I went to college at Florida State, they had at the time one of the only programs that had a master's degree in applied behavior analysis. And it was an undergraduate program there. And so I went through the program and then I went to grad school at Florida Tech, which had at the time one of the only programs for what I do. And it just kind of everything kept laying itself before me. When I worked in early intervention, I was working under the illusion that somebody was doing what I do right now. I was working with little kids for 20 years.
Yeah. Right. Remember that.
And I loved it. And I'm like, oh, and we're passing them off to the people over there. And I just would, in my head, I don't know, cognitive dissonance helped me do this, but I was like, the people over there. When I closed the practice and went on to do a couple of projects at Emory, I found out real quick, there is nobody over there. And that devastated me to my core. What had I been doing my whole career?
Right.
I'd been passing people off to nobody. And so in 2020, when the pandemic hit, and my project work at Emory ended because I was helping them with these adult service programs, I would say, like setting them up. I had almost no other choice because I had done all this work and I had made this revelation that there was nothing. And that's how we started Parallel was there's nobody. So let's be somebody in this space.
Right. Basically taking from an entrepreneur standpoint, solving problems.
Yeah.
Right. Where, and in some cases, people don't know they have the problem.
Yeah. I did not know the problem existed.
Right. Every time we talk about work, I come up with the same example, but our listeners have not heard this example. So you can humor me for a minute.
Sure.
But there's a movie on Amazon, published by Amazon, called Peanut Butter Falcon.
Yes.
So if you guys haven't seen Peanut Butter Falcon, it's a great family movie. But it's a young man with Down syndrome who, I guess his parents had passed away. He gets thrown into an old folks home.
Yes.
And some old folks help him break out,
Yes.
or one in particular helps him break out. And he goes on this journey. And on this journey, he's looking for a famous wrestler that he'd been watching. And the wrestler's all washed up now because he was watching probably an old VHS or something, right?
Yes.
But it takes you through that journey. But you say, when we first talked about this, you said that can happen a lot with no planning. That if something happens to you, your loved one just ends up in a court system who puts them somewhere.
Yes.
That may not be the best fit because they don't have the government doesn't have the right tools.
They don't. They really don't. And I didn't see that movie. Honestly, people kept telling me to see the movie. And I was like, why do I need to see this movie so bad? So I actually watched it on a plane, I think in like December or maybe even like August of last year, sometime in the fall. And I mean, I broke down hysterically crying because I was like, this is what I'm trying to tell people not to do.
Right.
Somebody made a movie about it.
Right.
And really what that movie is about somebody's journey to independence that was not given to them.
Right.
And so you have an older individual in the movie who's, presumably in like his early 30s or maybe late 20s. And he wants independence. He wants to see the world. He wants to experience things. And he does in the movie. He's on the sailboat and then he's, at a party, at a bonfire party with like strangers in the woods. Right. And then he's in this like strange wrestling ring
Right.
in the backwoods of I think North Florida or something in the end. And he's
Right.
having the time of his life
Right.
because he's never, ever been given the opportunity to experience any of it. He's never been exposed to any of it. And that's all he wanted. And if you put these things off and you're robbing somebody of those experiences, and that's the other thing that we really do is, there's a runway for everybody. I don't care who you are, what your diagnosis is. There's a runway to like a successful, independent life. And the longer the runway, the better your chances are that you're going to achieve that. But the shorter the runway, the more likely things are going to happen. And so that kid in that movie, or that adult child, had no runway. So he just like jumped literally out of the window and said, I'm going to go get it. And so now I tell people, you should watch this movie, because if you don't do something now, whether you're paralyzed by fear, whether you think there's nothing out there, whether you're convinced that there's something better, you just don't want to change. Like, this is what's going to happen to your loved one. You don't want this.
Right. Well, not the first part.
Not the first part. Yeah. The second part's amazing. I was like cheering him on.
Right. So what are some of the biggest challenges you see families face when you're going through this process?
They're paralyzed. They go through early intervention, which is really common for most of our families, where an early intervention is the period of time where you identify a diagnosis or an issue, and then you aggressively try to mitigate that thing, whether it's through therapy or school-based services. You're like, I'm going to fix this. The families and the child together go through a very intense process of mitigation. And then when they've graduated from whatever that is, they're like, oh, I'm done. That was really hard. And they're tired. And I understand that. But then they come to the transition age and they're like, oh my gosh, there's more. And they're paralyzed. They don't want to do it again. They don't want to have to go through that again. And I worked for years in early intervention services, and I saw this, and I can identify it really well. And I understand why it happens. But when I meet a family for the first time who's decided they're going to embark on this journey, that's the barrier. Is I don't want to do this again. This was too hard the first time. But like the movie, it gets harder the longer you wait to do it. And so that's the struggle we have with clients or prospective clients, is convincing them, hey, you need to do this thing. And here, let me tell you why.
I mean, from the planning perspective, we hear sometimes things like, well, something happens to me. I have this life insurance policy that pays for our son's care, or a lot of times they have a sibling that will take care of them. And it's always interesting. If you talk to the sibling, sometimes they have a little different take on who's got it.
Yes.
Right.
Very much.
And then when you think about facilities, not even like a lockdown kind of facility, but just a place that someone could go live. It's not cheap. And if you don't have any other income, then it gets, you start draining assets really quickly.
Very quickly.
So when you guys are working on a life plan, you're also taking into account the financial aspects, but also the estate planning aspects, getting the estate set up to care for someone with disabilities, correct?
Yes. Our best case scenario, if I'm thinking about a client that we really want to work with, is somebody who has a special needs trust attorney, and somebody who has a wealth planner and manager who is really familiar with what's going on. You can write anything you want down on a piece of paper, and you can save all the money you want in the world. But if you don't have a descript plan and a coordination amongst those people, it's almost like it didn't happen.
Right.
And we've seen that. We've had clients come to us, and the parents are really proud because they're like, I saved $7 million. And you write down on paper, okay, we'll reach out to the wealth manager and say, hey, this is their expectation of care. Can you write down for me, just in numbers, what that's going to cost? And does this correlate with what they have? And every single time, people are just floored. And I am blown away, actually, every single time, too. If there's not an issue with life expectancy with our client, with the individual that we're planning for, you're talking about sometimes 50 years.
Well, not only that, but you got to get yourself through retirement, which theoretically you plan to age 95, but let's just say you plan to 90. Then, so that's typically what, 30 years for most people, 25 years. And then you probably had your child when you were 25 to 30. So that's another 25 to 30 years of your money has to keep lasting.
Yeah.
In most families, that's not normal.
No. And nobody thinks like that when they have a child. No one thinks about how am I going to have 100 years of money of high needs money.
Yeah, correct. And actually that's where this is the few times, and our regular listeners be like, what? When he says this, that's like the few times that if that situation happens in the first couple of years, if you start doing really long-term planning, that's when the whole life insurance policy comes into play. That's like the only time I can think of this might actually be a good idea to buy a whole life insurance policy. But honestly, at the very beginning of this, though, you're probably just getting your bearings. You don't know what the future looks like. But by the time they're a teenager, right?
Yeah, you really do.
You would know then that, hey, I better start paying into a policy, not a term policy, but a whole life policy or universal life policy that will last to my age 100, so that we can then take these resources and put it in for our child. Or if you just have enough in wealth, you could possibly do that. But it would take a lot of planning. And if you have others, if they have other siblings, that might be a hard decision too. That might be, hey, there's not going to be split equally. It's going to be split different because we have to care for your brother or sister, right?
Yeah. And that's a tough conversation. If you've accumulated significant wealth and then you have to break the news to your 1, 2, 3 other children, you get nothing.
Right.
And, sibling A gets $10 million.
But not $10 million to go have fun with. It's $10 million to be able to live and thrive. Not for any fun stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, not for any fun stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah. Interesting. So when you think about estate planning, and again, we don't have an estate planning attorney sitting here, but you and I both know what the basics are. So what type of trust do you see setting up for a person with disabilities as a parent?
A special needs trust. And there are attorneys who do this specifically. And, we have our favorites here in Atlanta, but I'm sure there are amazing professionals all over the country that do this specifically. And I would highly encourage people to coordinate with somebody that does this on a daily basis, because there are ways that you can maximize your assets. And there are also ways that you can make them disappear very quickly. And somebody who knows what they're doing is key in this situation, even if it costs a little bit more, which it does.
Correct.
For the right person.
If the attorney does litigation, also does adoptions and does like 5 other things, this is probably not the attorney you need to be writing documents for this. There are attorneys that all they do is specialize in this.
Yes.
And they do cost more. But
they do.
The documents will be created properly.
Yes. And that is just,
really
I
important.
can't stress how important that is for people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You think about guardianship. So in most cases, do you see that a person still needs to have a guardian who's disabled, or are they able to care for themselves? Like you think from a estate planning standpoint, you typically name a guardian over somebody.
Yes. And so, that's a tricky one, and it's really personal for people. And there's a lot of emotions that go into this process. You have to make a decision. Does this person, the adult child at that point, have the capacity to make their own decisions, to make their own financial decisions? And we start to bring into these conversations, and I am not an attorney, but we certainly work with a lot of them, and we work with a lot of guardianship issues. But we have to ask these questions. Do they understand both the things on paper and the tricky people in the world? We call it the tricky people problem.
Right.
If you have left $10 million to somebody and they remain their own guardian, and a tricky person comes along, they have complete power over that money.
Yeah.
They could write a $10 million check to a stranger off the street and you could do nothing about it.
Right.
And so, when we have these conversations with families, we have to think about the now, 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the future. And when the parents are no longer here, what could happen?
Right.
And that's a hard conversation for people. And so when they make the decision to pursue guardianship, it's emotional and it is hard, but you have to have the conversation early.
Yeah. Inside of irrevocable trust, you would have a custodian or a trustee in charge of the money. You could still leave the person in charge of their physical bodies. But then sometimes even that could be maybe not the best decision. So maybe a sibling with the backup as another sibling or a close family member.
Oh, all the time siblings become, most of our families, a sibling becomes, involved on some level to help make those decisions in the future.
Are you curious why annuities keep coming up as a potential investment option? People are often told that annuities can effectively mitigate investment risks and help secure their financial future. However, annuities often benefit the salesperson and might not be the best choice for you as a consumer. To learn more about the various types of annuities, the negatives of owning them, and better investment alternatives, we have a free ebook on our website just for you. To download our ebook, Buyer Beware, Why Do They Keep Trying to Sell You That Annuity? Simply click the link in the episode notes or visit wiserinvestor.com/guides. Now let's get back to the episode.
I also think about protecting government benefits. I don't know exactly what the government benefits, what this means, honestly, as a planner. When you think about what government benefits does a person with disability get? You get Social Security. I mean, so there's requirements for that. That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But what other government benefits would they be getting? Because if you're coming from a family with wealth, Medicaid's not something, right?
Well, I mean,
unless we just shelter them away from the assets completely.
Yeah. And a lot of people make decisions based, sometimes it's a very complex financial situation. And what they do is they try to decide what's best for our scenario. And that's what I say is there's lots of workshops on, SSI and Medicaid and how do we structure these things. But a lot of the times, especially with our clients who have significant wealth, they have to make a really personal decision about how to kind of arrange their assets.
Yeah.
And, in this is really complicated. It's like an onion. There's a lot of layers to it. If the individual is working, how much can they earn? Where can it go? If the house that they're living in was gifted to them, if they have assets over a certain amount of money, a lot of people think it's just like one number over here and one number over here, which is why we always say we need somebody who knows what they're talking about here. We need like a wealth manager who knows these numbers. And we need, again, that attorney that can talk to the wealth manager so that we're not making plans that unravel a very complex financial situation that the family has created.
Sure. So let's walk through your process. So I come to you, I have a child with disabilities. I'm a normal American or maybe more upper class American family, incomes over maybe $400,000 a year. I'm building retirement assets that are be good for me and my spouse maybe, but maybe not good for 50 years. Good. Right. What is the process? Where do you start? What journey do they go through? What's your client journey? I guess is what I'm asking.
When they first come, we say, do you have a special needs trust attorney? And do you have a wealth manager? Most of them have a wealth manager. Some of them have a special needs trust. And so we say, we insist that somebody has a special needs trust attorney. So if somebody isn't willing to do that, that's not somebody we can work with. But so we send them to somebody if they don't have it done already. And then we work with the wealth manager and say, hey, we're creating this journey for this individual. Can we check in with you from time to time to see if we're on the right track? Does it align with their financial assets, with their plan for the future?
Right.
Because we can put anything on paper, but if it doesn't align with what they have financially planned, then it won't work. And then together, what we're looking at is the person's sense of self. Who will they be when they mature into adulthood or when they advance in their adulthood journey? Who will they be in terms of their educational journey? Where will they live? That's a big one in terms of finances. Yeah. How will they work? Where will they work? And how will they integrate into the community? I would say the piece of that is most impacted by dollars is that living piece.
Yeah.
And that one is tricky because of how our state and how our nation deals with special needs housing. And so, we have constructed everything from the parents purchasing a home and putting it into some sort of like sheltered trust to people going into these facilities that cost $10,000 or $15,000 a month. And there's no wrong answer. It has to be the right answer for the family. It has to be the right answer for the finances.
Yeah.
And the individual we're planning for has to have a voice in it as well, if they can.
So what would you say are the biggest issues you see? Housing
for sure. A lot of people come to us with one of two questions. Where will my child matriculate in terms of post-secondary education, if that's on the table for them? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of opportunity now that we used to not have, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And then where will they live? And so those are two important questions.
What are some resources? Where would you start even trying to figure that out?
There's a different answer for that for every state. And there's a different answer for that within every geographical community. A lot of our clients, that's a huge consideration. They don't want to move their loved one away.
Yeah.
They want to be as close as they can for a long time.
Right.
If they're not going to be at home. And so we're coordinating, a lot of, this is like 5D chess. We're looking at geography. We're looking at opportunity. We're looking at educational pursuits. We're looking at living. We're looking at all of these things while coordinating with these wealth managers and special needs attorneys. And so it's a complex ordeal. It takes us about 6 months to put together for each client.
So if you think about areas of planning, we cover all those here, but this is a whole nother area that you'd have to add to that. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I see this is when a client does wiser planning, your firm comes in as like an overlay on top of that. Mm-hmm. And our plan may not work in an environment where you come in and say, these are the real costs and this is what we'll do. And let's go build that as a line item in the overall plan. Mm-hmm. I think it's really easy for planners to say, we have a special needs trust and his share goes into the 1/3 and the sister or brother is going to oversee that share and everything will just be fine. And that may not be the case. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of walk through, I sign up as a client. What does that cost? Is it vary per family?
Sometimes. It depends on where they are in the world.
Well, we'll assume they're in the Eastern Seaboard. Yes.
They're on the Eastern Seaboard. We do this virtually with people, and we also travel to our clients on request.
Okay.
And so the process is $5,000, and it takes about 6 months, a very intentional time. And we are very upfront with that with our clients. We need your time. It can't be given away to somebody who helps out with the house. It can't be given to a secretary or a nanny. Like, we need the caregiving people to be members of the planning team. And so that's really important for people to know, is that this is something that you embark on when you say, I have the time to spare.
Yeah. It's pretty intense. So you definitely want, and you should be doing this for your child. I mean, that only makes sense. Mm-hmm. And honestly, $5,000 is about what we would charge for a flat fee plan on our side. So to me, that makes perfect sense, with drilling down into the details that you guys do. How do they learn more about the program? What is your website?
Our website is parallelintl.com, and all of the information is there, and they can contact us through our contact form there, or they can email hello@parallelintl.com.
I love the hello part. That's pretty catchy. We've also linked that in our show notes, wherever you're listening to the podcast. Anything else you want to leave our listeners with as far as the journey? Or
Yeah, I would just say, if you're listening and you're a parent of an adolescent or adult child with special needs, and you feel a little panicked after this, because a lot of times when we go on shows or when we speak in front of an audience, there is a look on their face. It's, oh my gosh, like, what am I about? What did I not do? Or what do I need to do? You can always start tomorrow. Like, think today, reflect, and you can start tomorrow. It's never too late. And so I would just say, take the first step.
Sounds good. Thank you for coming on and talking to us about this. We've a few episodes you might be interested in. Episode 146, The Power of Life Insurance to Meet Your Family's Goals. Episode 214, What is Disability Insurance and Do I Need It? Living in the Moment While Planning for the Future. That's episode 224. All these were more long-term focused planning. I think it's our first one we've ever really done disability planning, at least a special episode. Related educations, what is the role of a trustee, and tips to safeguard assets for future generations. That's on the YouTube channel, all linked in our show notes. So thank you again, Megan, for coming in and doing this. And listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to a Wiser Retirement podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you don't miss any new episodes. We'd also appreciate if you could leave a rating and review. If you have any questions about anything that was discussed today, head to wiserinvestor.com and reach out. This episode was produced by Rachel Dotson. This podcast is strictly for informational purposes only and is not to be considered as investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any financial products, securities, digital assets, or any other investment vehicles, or a basis to make any financial decisions. Wiser Wealth Management Incorporated is a registered investor advisor with the SEC. The host and/or guests may personally own securities, digital assets, or other investment vehicles mentioned on this podcast. Neither the host nor guests of the show are compensated for their participation, and no referral fees are paid to or received by any host or guest for clients, listeners, or similar interests. Investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor, tax professional, insurance professional, and/or legal professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.